Hello everyone, Jack Delahy here, founder of collegeconsulting.us. And today I'm actually going to answer a very common question that we get, and I'm going to answer it with math. Yes, you heard that right, math. I'm going to teach you what goes on mathematically, unit by unit, admission by admission inside an admissions department, and answer the question with math that we get all the time, which is, my child had middle 50% grades and test scores. Why didn't they get accepted? Now, to be honest, we usually get this inquiry after a student has applied, not through our program, senior year, and parents reach out. And unfortunately, there's really not much we can do at that point. But because this is such a common inquiry we get from parents of high school seniors basically saying what went wrong, I wanted to answer this question with math. And there is a mathematical answer to this question at many of the top schools in the country. So first and foremost, I actually want to read an excerpt from this book. It is called Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions by Jeffrey Selingo. He goes into 3 elite college admissions departments behind the scenes and actually walks through what he sees. It's really, really valuable for parents who are watching this YouTube channel if you want to know what goes on inside those admissions doors at top universities. And today, I'm actually going to go through some math at Amherst College. I'm actually from Massachusetts originally. Amherst College is one of the top liberal arts colleges in the country. And yes, every year, students choose to go to Amherst over Harvard. That is how elite it is. I just give that context because I know we have families from all over the country watching this. But in New England, Amherst is an elite top liberal arts college. And guess what? They only enroll 1,900 students total, which is less than 500 students per grade. So I wanted to read some background because guess what? That's actually one of the 3 schools that Jeffrey Selingo in his book goes into. And today we're going to walk through math as it's based on just simple admissions slots, and then how there is a cheat code to get into schools, which is athletics, which we'll talk about. By the way, about 10% of our students that we take into our all-inclusive college confidence program are considering athletics. So for the vast majority of students that join our program, they're in this green area that I call non-athletes, and I'll get into this in a second. But first and foremost, let me read an excerpt. By the way, if you do go have this book, we'll link to it down below. This is found on page 154. From Jeffrey Selingo, Amherst is an elite, small New England college in western Massachusetts. It annually competes with Williams College for the top spot in the U.S. News rankings among liberal arts colleges. Like I said, students truly go to Amherst every year over Harvard. But the other thing you should know about Amherst is that it likes to brag about how it is home to the, quote, oldest athletics program in the nation. It cares about athletics a lot. Yes, so do other schools that tend to grab the sports headlines every week. Penn State, Alabama, Ohio State, and the list goes on and on. But the difference between those schools and Amherst is that while sports permeate the culture at a place like Ohio State, athletes themselves don't overwhelm the student body of some 47,000 undergraduates. Because Amherst and other top liberal arts colleges are so small, Amherst enrollment is just shy of 1,900. Athletes take up a significant portion of the incoming class in campus. I'm going to keep reading here in a second, but a small interlude. We're talking about liberal arts colleges here, but guess what? This exact methodology also applies for the Ivy League schools. You can go look up. The Ivy League schools don't have that much more enrollment than an Amherst college. Now, they do have more, right? It's about double or triple. But the point is, we're not talking about a 47,000 undergraduate Ohio State here. So most of the top schools in the country, if you go into U.S. News and World Report, look at the top universities and top liberal arts colleges, are all in this sub 10,000 undergraduate student range. And yet, they care a lot about athletics. We're talking about Harvard and Princeton and Yale. We're talking about Amherst. We're talking about Williams College. We're talking about Bowdoin. We're talking about some of these top schools in the country, and they all follow this trend, which is they still care about athletics, even though obviously there's some of the top academic schools in the country, which is where, as you'll see in a second, this delineation between the red bucket and the green bucket comes in. Now to continue, in the fall of 2018, Amherst enrolled 676 athletes over its 4 classes of undergraduates, 36 more athletes than the University of Alabama overall. That's the same Alabama where the football team reached the college football playoff 4 consecutive years in a row. Amherst has 200 more athletes than Northwestern University, a member of the Big Ten Power Conference. Because Amherst student body is tiny, athletes tend to stick out more than they would at an Alabama or a Northwestern. At Amherst, athletes make up about 36% of its undergraduate population, compared with just 2% at Alabama and 6% at Northwestern. I know it sounds crazy to say Amherst and Alabama have the same number of athletes, but think about it this way. Both have baseball teams with 35 players, and women's soccer with 25 athletes, and men's basketball with 16 players. So while Alabama has lecture halls that can hold nearly the entire Amherst student body, the university only needs so many first basemen. Because they field dozens of sports with attention paid to making sure each roster is full, selective colleges like Amherst or Harvard, he mentions Harvard here, find themselves with fewer spots for non-athletes, especially as the volume and quality of these applications increase. On campuses where the competition to get in is stiff and seats severely limited, admissions is often turned into a zero-sum game because of athletics. In a second here, I'm going to walk through the math, but this blue rectangle that you see is the definition of zero sum. Amherst will not be increasing its student body anytime soon, unless they buy more land and increase their admissions, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So 490 students is locked in stone at Amherst for every incoming class, and it has been for dozens and dozens and dozens of years. So there is a zero-sum game between athletes and non-athletes, and as this is about to explain, the football team will always need to have football players no matter what. In fact, a football team at Amherst has relatively the same number of spots as a football team at University of Alabama, even though this blue rectangle at University of Alabama is significantly bigger. He goes on to say, let me explain. Many selective schools reserve a specific number of slots in admissions for athletes to hold them a place, so they don't get crowded out by higher achieving non-athletes, right? And this does make sense. If you are an institution and you care about fielding a football team, the last thing you want to do is fill up your 490 students with top academics and realize that you don't have a quarterback, right? Now, again, I'm not saying that this is fair, unfair, just, unjust. I'm just telling you the facts. This is how it works. And again, if you want to learn more, feel free to go and grab this book. Okay, Georgetown allocates about 158 slots. By the way, Georgetown, again, you can go look it up. Top 30 U.S. News and World Report school. And by the way, last 4 admission cycles, we've sent students to Georgetown. But guess what? Those admission cycles that we've sent students to Georgetown in our program, they were in this green bucket, non-athletes. Let's hear about the athletes. Georgetown allocates about 158 slots out of 1,600 in its first year class to coaches in over 22 sports. Bucknell holds 170 slots of about 970 seats in the class. The University of Virginia earmarks 180 slots out of 3,700 spaces in the class, all for athletes. Now, if you're saying, what does earmarked mean? What does a slot mean? Here you go. The truth is, athletes simply have a leg up, a strong leg up in admissions, because again, to put this in real world terms, Amherst needs to know they have a quarterback on their football team. So yes, you better believe the academic threshold to get into Amherst, if you are a quarterback that the Amherst coach has recruited, is far lower. A slot is a virtual lock on admissions for an athlete, although schools don't guarantee slots for specific applicants. Admissions officers still pre-read the applications of highly rated athletes to see if they're in the ballpark academically. A plug from a coach or athletic official can provide a strong hook for applicants whose academic accomplishments otherwise might not ensure admission. Here's how the slot system plays out on a campus like Amherst. And instead of reading it now, I'm actually going to show you math on the whiteboard so you can understand how this plays out. Okay, for the sake of this example, again, I'm going to use Amherst. But again, this general methodology where you're going to be able to see the breakdown of athletes and non-athletes will apply to most of the top schools in the country. You can go look at the undergraduate populations of most of the highest ranked schools in the country, the Ivy League schools, etc., the NESCAC schools in New England, the top liberal arts schools, and they all have sub 10,000 undergraduates, which means this methodology that I'm about to share with you, the math as to why your child might have middle 50% grades and test scores and didn't get in anywhere applies. Because as you'll see, this middle 50% is the middle 50%, but it's not the middle 50% for non-athletes. So let's get into it. Amherst has 1,900 students. 1,900 students. That means they have 490 students per grade. 490 students per grade. Of this 490, guess how many Amherst has earmarked, meaning reserved, for student athletes. Now, by the way, in athletics, in recruiting, in our program, our college confidence program, we actually have an entire section for our athletes, which make up about 10% of our incoming class. And in there, we talk about how there's a wide range of earmarked, what that means. If you are a top recruit, you getting earmarked is nearly guaranteed admission. If you're a lesser ranked recruit, you getting earmarked is less than a guaranteed for admission. But in general, just so you know, whether you're highly recruited or less recruited, when you get earmarked, you absolutely have a bump up in admissions. And guess what? Of the 490 students per grade at Amherst, Amherst reserves 157 slots for earmarked athletes. That is 32%, folks. 32% of their incoming class are earmarked for athletes. That is this red portion that you see right here. That is this red portion. So you can understand that they have earmarked nearly a third of all of their admission slots for student athletes, meaning that admissions process for these 157 students is different. It goes through the athletics department first. The athletics department then goes to admissions and says, we want a pre-read on an application. It is an entirely different process for these 157 than the remaining 333. So now, let's do some more math. In the class of 2029, most recent application pool, guess how many applicants Amherst got? They received a record number of applicants. I have the data here. They received 15,818 applications. 15,818 applications for 490 spots. By the way, the math says that is 3.1%. 3.1% admissions rate. 490 spots. They already said they never take more than 490 students in a grade. In this most recent year, 15,818 applications. Wow. And by the way, yes, the top schools in the country are seeing about 3% acceptance rate. This past year, one of our top students got into MIT, and I think you can look it up. MIT had a 3.6% acceptance rate this year. This is what we are seeing at the top schools in the country in 2025 as I record this. But here's where it gets crazy. Remember, 157 spots are reserved or earmarked for athletes. So of these applications, minus 157, minus 157. What you get here is 15,661 normal person apps. And I'm defining normal person as non-athlete apps for 333 non-athlete spots. When you do this math, that comes out to 2.1%. We've gone from 3.1% to really, for most of you watching this YouTube video, 2.1%. We've gone from 490 spots, if you technically asked an Amherst admissions officer, to really 333 spots. 333 spots for 15,661 applicants. And this is where this brings up the middle 50%. When we see parents of high school seniors who reach out and say, my child had middle 50% grades, my child had middle 50% test scores. And by the way, as an aside, if you want to know middle 50% grades and test scores, you can use plethora of resources on the internet these days, such as College Simply. You can also look at the common data set for the individual school. But the point is, if Amherst says, oh, our average student has a 4.1 GPA and a 1540 on their SAT, and your student had a 4.1 GPA and a 1540 on your SAT, and you say they're right in that middle 50% sweet spot, what you're looking at is this math. What you're looking at is the middle 50% as it relates to the entire school. But this is why in our program, we guide our students. The middle 50% likely will not cut it. Now, to be clear, take a look at this. This chunk right here is students who are in the middle 50% or lower for non-athletes. There is a small chunk. And I have to plug. If you go and look at our Emily's, our Massimos, our students who were able to have sub 50% grades and test scores and still get into their dream schools. We'll see if we can link to those case studies here. This is where our Emily fell. This is where our Massimo fell because they actually followed our advice and completed high leverage activities to stand out. But folks, this is few and far between. And it's even fewer and further between if you don't have a program like ours to guide you over 4 years to how to gain this elite level admission. The bigger thing that I want to point out is that this line is middle 50% as it relates to a whole. But for the vast majority of you watching this, you cannot target the middle 50% and say my child should get in. Really, what you need to target is the middle 50% of here to even have a chance. This is where your target should be. That is where, for non-athletes, you should be targeting in terms of grades and test scores at a school to even really give yourself a fighting chance. At the end of the day, colleges are private institutions. Colleges are a business. And if you're a parent out here watching this, I need you to understand this. They have rules that they can make up on their own, and they have the right to. Again, I am not saying that this is right, wrong, just, unjust. I'm simply reporting the facts so that if you're watching this and you're a parent of a 9th grader or a 10th grader and you're just getting involved in the college planning process, you can actually know the rules to the game. Because those who know the rules to the game can then understand how to optimize to give yourself, or in this case, your child, the best chance at winning the game. I'm creating this YouTube video because I don't want you, if you're watching this, to be one of those many, many parents, dozens of parents who reach out to us in senior spring of their child's senior spring and say, my child had this. Why did they get rejected? My child had middle 50% scores. We thought those were the rules to the game. That's how we wanted to play. Folks, the reason is because there were other factors in college admissions behind those closed doors. And this now allows you to be aware of them. We talk about high leverage activities in our program all the time. And if you do have a child who is a possible athlete, please know that there is, in our current college admissions days, perhaps no single higher leverage activity they can continue to do than to work on athletic recruiting. If you do have a child who is an athlete, please, please, please understand the earlier you reach out to coaches, the more often you reach out to coaches, the sooner you get on their radar and say, hey, I'm potentially interested in your school and this sport. And oh, by the way, I continue to improve. This is ultra, ultra, ultra high leverage. Athletes have different rules to the game. Again, is it right? Is it wrong? Just, unjust? I'm not going to comment on that. I'm simply reporting how it works. At Amherst, 32% of their incoming class is reserved for athletes. The remainder is for all the non-athletes to fight it out at a 2.1% ratio. So to conclude, if you are a parent of a non-athlete, please understand that this is your mark minimum that you should be striving for to give your child a chance, not this mark. And if you are a parent of a potential athlete, please understand that if you lean into athletics, you will have a better chance of admission at the top schools in the country, meaning the Ivy Leagues, meaning the top liberal arts schools like Amherst. I hope this math helped. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and comment below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'll read them all. At collegeconsulting.us, we have one mission, and it's to help the students' highest performing students reach their full collegiate potential so they don't end up as those seniors in high school saying, if only I had known the rules to the game. If you want any more insight, feel free to click our College Confidence community. It's 100% free. You can apply to join, and our Director of Student Admissions reviews every profile that applies to join. We'll accept you, and you have a ton of free resources in there. And lastly, I will say, we have a 4-year all-inclusive start-to-finish college confidence program that helps 9th graders and 10th graders work through 11th and 12th grade into freshman fall of college so they understand the rules to the game. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can click the link below, apply for an entirely free college planning strategy session with your family and a member of our team. Until next time, cheers.